The Lord's joy gives strength. Sometimes we forget that the Bible's human authors experienced the raw realities of life just as we do. Nehemiah was such a man. His was not the easy path. Earthly comforts and an abundance of supportive friendships were not his normal. Yet he faithfully rose above the opposition and racial pessimism to achieve great things for Yahweh. In 445 BC, Persian King Artaxerxes sent exiled Nehemiah, who was a trusted Israelite official, to rebuild Jerusalem's broken-down walls. Despite opposition and internal disunity, Nehemiah succeeded through godly wisdom and determination, personal integrity, courage, and keeping Yahweh in his thinking. Nehemiah carried through with what God had inspired within him and drew strength from the joy of the Lord while taking the people of his community with him. The question I want to consider is, how did Nehemiah and the people with him experience strength and joy through prolonged struggles? I suggest reading Nehemiah chapter 8 verses 9 through 12, which holds some of the practical answers as listed below. Nehemiah's closest friends were spiritually strong, particularly Ezra the priest and scribe. Added to Ezra's friendship were the Levites, although to a lesser degree. They observed days dedicated to the Lord and to the teaching of God's law. They did not hide their emotional response when listening to God's law being read and explained. There was no denying the extreme difficulty of life for them at that time. But they did not deny that their poor response to the Lord during their difficulties was wrong also. Grief was permitted, yet it was also given boundaries, and the people needed to stop mourning and weeping, otherwise grief would cripple them. Nehemiah, Ezra, and the Levites applied God's word to the grieving population with clarity. In turn, the people understood God's law and chose to use their understanding as inspiration for worship. Nehemiah encouraged and participated in celebrating the Lord with expressions of joy, setting aside the grief they had been experiencing. Nehemiah joined the people in actively sharing food and joy with each other, especially with those people who were poor and lacked the physical resources to celebrate the Lord. This was intentional, sacrificial, and communal. Selfishness and isolation did not belong here. The people calmed themselves, focused on the Lord, and prioritized the Lord over their grief. This did not deny or ignore the reality of their grief, but applied worship and fellowship as therapy for it. Although Nehemiah was a leader, he did not separate himself from the people he was leading. Above all else, Nehemiah kept the Lord as his priority throughout opposition and throughout both his personal and community struggles, which included severe difficulties. They took the time to confess their sins, to learn from God's law, and to respond with worship. The Levites initiated worship with the following declaration of praise. Stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth and all that is in it, the seas and all that is in them, and you preserve all of them. And the host of heaven worships you. Nehemiah chapter 9 verses 5 through 6. May these brief observations from Nehemiah encourage us to prioritize worship over grief. By God's grace, may we apply the joy of the Lord, which can become our strength. I'm Lincoln Forlong, and you can view the transcripts of the pastor's pen, including Bible references, at focusbiblechurch.com.